A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Well, the federal election hasn't got a date yet, but it's coming quickly. And we're getting a handle on the political landscape today with a Christian guide to political parties. Greg Bondar is the national spokesperson for Christian Voice Australia. The other hat he wears, he leads Every Home for Christ in Australia. Greg Bondar, a special welcome back to 2020.
Oh, delighted to be with you again, Neil. Thank you.
Okay, Greg. A great system of democracy, but often a nightmare of confusion when you're standing there at the ballot box and you've got that lower house is usually a little bit easier, but the upper house ballot form, confusion reigns. A bit of a Christian guide to political parties might be very useful for us now. Where do we start with this?
Yeah, look, Neil, let me just quickly paint the landscape as to where we are in Australia for the federal election. Look, we've got 151 electorates. They're the lower house that need to be elected. We have 76 senators that need to be elected. Currently, Neil, we have 10 independents sitting in the House of Representatives and 4 independents in the Senate. Now, as you mentioned, there are 55 political parties, but if we take out all the duplications in, for example, Labor, Liberals, Nationals and Greens, all have not only a federal registration but a state registration. If we take that out, we end up now with 25 political parties for all of us to choose from at this upcoming election. And just very quickly, as you mentioned, and guess what, Neil, out of those 25 political parties, there is only one party that actually carries the name Christian. So there's something for us to all consider as voters, Christian voters.
And that political party, of course, is called the Australian Christians. Correct. And just as a little aside on that, of course, they've just had the Western Australian state election. And there's a little bit of celebration there because it's been a long, hard road, but it looks as though at this point Australian Christians have won a seat in the Western Australian upper house. So that's actually a really good breakthrough. They've been battling away for a long time and deliberately with Christian in their name. So if you sort of hold to your guns and stand firm, eventually people get to know what you do believe and what they stand for.
Absolutely, and it's interesting, the Australian Christians, it's about time. They were registered, Neil, on the 19th of December 2011. So after 14 years of continually trying, I'm delighted to see that their chances of getting an upper house member elected is very, very good. But that said, Neil, guess what? There are a lot of parties that have just registered. There are, I think, about 6 parties that have only just registered in the last year. And a lot of them are names that you may or may not recognise. But the point I want to make here is that there's not a lot of political credibility. And these parties include Family First, Better Together Party. Gee, that makes the mind boggle there, I think. Better Together, I don't know what that's about. Now, Australia's Voice, I'll come back to that in a minute. The Gerard Rennick People First Party, the Libertarian Party, Tammy Tyrrell for Tasmania. That's got a good rhyming alliteration there, Neil. So these parties only have just been registered in the last 12 months. But, Neil, a quick warning. The Australia's Voice Party, registered on 17th of December 2024, is actually an apologist party for the Muslims and headed up by, guess who? Fatima Payman, Neil.
Okay, now, this is interesting, and if we could pause here for a moment, I'll get your reflection, because here's the Australia's Voice Party, newly registered, representing an Islamic Muslim contingency of voters, and they're going into the election with some expectation they're going to win an upper house seat. You've got Christians who have been so now disorganised because the voting public hasn't recognised voting according to your Christian conscience actually has a real benefit. But somehow or other, there's something here. You've got to look at the rise of the Australia's Voice Party and their expectation of winning a seat in our Senate, and the thought that there are Christian parties or a lack of organisation there that might not see any Christian party elected. Any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, that really worries me, Neil, because you see, if you go to the UK elections, which was like 7-8 months ago, whatever, the Muslim Islamic parties over there actually, I think, obtained about 7 or 8 seats in the parliament. So that is quite disturbing from the point of view that there is a voice there for the Muslim community, and they are supporting those particular parties. So if that's replicated here in Australia, then Australia's voice could attract some high number of votes from various Muslim communities around Australia. So that's disturbing because we've only got one Christian party, as you said, the Australian Christians. Neil, I have to also say very quickly that there are a lot of other parties that claim to be Christian or Christian-oriented, but they do not use the word Christian in their political name.
Okay, and the one that comes to mind for me, of course, Family First Party, and Reformed had a little bit of a rocky patch there where they joined together with one bigger party, the Australian Conservatives, and that was all disbanded, and now they've reformed. They've tried to pick up from where they left off, but as you say, technically it's relatively new, and technically it's not Christian, although there are certainly a lot of Christian values that are foundation for their policies. Is this the sort of thing you ought to look at for the party you might be thinking of voting for, where their policies are in relation to a Christian understanding of life?
Yeah, look, Neil, I'm not recommending any political party. It's not my job to do that. It's my job to get people to vote according to their biblical conscience. The only thing I can say about Family First is that, quite frankly, if you dig deep, only registered 6 months ago, founded by 2 former South Australian Labor politicians, which says something in itself. And the fact that a lot of other parties, if you take Peter Dutton's, the Coalition, they've got Christian values as well. The other party that I want to quickly mention is, and you'd be surprised by this probably, Neil, is the Trumpet of Patriots Party, which is now backed by Clive Palmer. And they were registered on 26th of July 2011. So they've got a bit of history there. But guess what, Neil? Sylvana Niall, who was formerly Christian Democratic Party, appears to be their New South Wales Senate candidate. Now, again, so voters have to look carefully of who is behind each political party and what their background and history is now.
Okay, so you've got Clive Palmer with his Trumpet of Patriots Party, and one of those names, the Niall name, the wife of course, Fred Niall, Sylvana Niall, former Christian Democratic Party, lead for the New South Wales Senate candidate for the Trumpet of Patriots. It's an interesting development, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Let me ask you here, Greg, some notable Senate terms due to expire this year. Out of those well-known senators we'll often hear of, who's up for re-election?
Yeah, Neil, you might be interested in this because the Senate terms, as you know, they expire. It's half each election. So you've got in 2025, at this upcoming election, your own Malcolm Roberts, One Nation in Queensland, his term will expire. Interestingly, Alex Antic, South Australia, who I've got a lot of time for, Neil, his term expires. Interestingly, Jackie Lambie from Tasmania, her term expires. But interestingly also is Claire Chandler, who I have a lot of time for. Her term also expires, and she's a Tasmanian as well. So it'll be interesting to see whether they get re-elected, because a lot of those, in particular Claire and Alex, do have strong Christian values now.
Now, you've been planning for some time a new booklet around how Christians vote. What's happening with that one? When will listeners have access to that? Yeah,
Neil, I'm delighted to say that the book will be available middle of next week. They can go to my to the website, Christian Voice Australia. It is a new website, by the way, Neil, so I'm hoping people will make use of it. But it will be available again, Neil. It will outline why Christians should be involved in politics, why Christians should be engaged in the political process if they want to see a flourishing society based on Christian foundations now.
Let's get back to the parties. When we talk about newly formed parties, there's also the rough and tumble of the way political parties are upended and sometimes disappear. There's a deregistered list of political parties too. Who's on that list?
Yeah, look, I went through them. There have been 27 parties deregistered, Neil, since the last election, which was the 21st of May 2022. And in particular, two parties, which again rings a bell, the Christian Democratic Party, who I had a lot to do with, as you know, Neil. I was the national director at one stage. They were deregistered on the 17th of March 2022. Likewise, the Palmer United Party was deregistered on the 5th of May 2017. And as you know, Clive Palmer's reappeared under the Trumpet of Patriots Party.
Okay. Let's talk about all the political parties, the fact that they are vying for votes.
Yeah.
Your vote and my vote. And we might be saying we're not going to be partisan in any way, just going to look at the policies and how they align with our Christian worldview, the Christian way we think of truth and the things that will be good for society. What's your message for all political parties here, whether they be called Christian or whether they be called atheist or whatever?
Yeah, look, Neil, I think this is a real opportunity for all electors, in particular Christians that very much listen to Vision Radio. Here's the opportunity for you to ensure that Christ in Canberra and across Australia is going to be recognised. We need, in the 48th Parliament that's going to be elected, to restore Australia's moral foundation. Look, I'm very much really strong on this, Neil, because political parties need policies that actually align with our biblical principles, and it's so important that candidates, advance their faith, family and freedom in the true sense of the word, because without that, Neil, we're not going to have a country that's going to reflect a Christian foundation. And you can see what happened in the United States. A lot of the churches got behind Trump because they saw that there was a way there to get biblical worldview into politics and to the nation.
When we talk about political parties needing to have policies that align with biblical principles, I imagine the only way that really happens is if you don't vote for the parties that don't align with biblical principles and that you do vote for the parties that do.
Correct.
That's not that easy, but it's not all cut and dried because sometimes you're choosing the best of a bad bunch. But how do you see that biblical principles, what that looks like?
Look, I think we need guidance and biblical truth. Government leaders are going to struggle, Neil, to uphold righteousness. One of the problems we're going to have is that, look, rest assured, Neil, that a lot of MPs and candidates, they're going to forego their own biblical beliefs in an effort to be elected. And that's actually quite disturbing because rest assured that, the forces of secularism will try and undermine biblical truth. They will put pressure on Christian candidates, on conservative candidates. So we as Christians, we need to intercede for them because, Neil, we've got to support a party or a policy that reflects something about our biblical worldview. If we don't, we are not doing what the Bible commands us to do, quite frankly, Neil, is to spread the gospel and make disciples of all nations now.
What are your thoughts for tough times ahead? I've had a number of conversations on this program now, just recent times, where we're talking about just how serious this coming election is. Even in the John Anderson words, civilizational moment. Get the wrong policies in power at the next election, and that's going to change the trajectory for where our nation's going. It might be for the better if you get the right policies that you are voting for. But leaders are going to face some intense pressure because we are more deeply secularizing than most people realise. What are you thinking about what is lying ahead?
Look, Neil, I'm going to put my neck out here and say that the secularism, the media, anti-Christian MPs and candidates are going to make an all-out effort to impede Christians and conservative leaders from being elected. Now, have a look. As I said, you've already got the Australia's Voice Party, which is really an apologist party for the Muslims. So, look, what we've got, Neil, is a real attack on Christianity, a real attack on conservative candidates and MPs, And I think, if you look at Peter Dutton, I mean, he's really an alternative. I'm not saying to vote for him. I'm not saying not to vote for him. I'm saying he probably presents the best opportunity for Christians to reflect their voting. Again, there are other parties as well, but from my point of view, we have to look at what candidates and leaders are offering. And I've got to tell you, unfortunately, our Prime Minister has not been pro-Christian. And where is the religious discrimination bill, Neil? Nothing done about it. He promised us we'd get it. What did we get? Zilch. So I've got no faith in him whatsoever at this point in time now.
Okay, now a little insight here from you, because you've been around the Parliament House scene in Canberra over many decades.
Yeah.
You're not right there entrenched at this moment, but it's whoever has an open door to what lobbyists often would be, governing some of the way policy is formed. Any thoughts here around closed doors to Christian lobbyists, those ones who are just not listening to what Christians have to add, a biblical truth foundation, which we will say is going to lead to the flourishing of a nation, but others are obviously in denial of that. What about open doors and closed doors that happens in Canberra?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. Look, I have to tell you, Christian Voice Australia, for example, the organisation that I'm the national spokesperson for, Neil, we have had doors shut. There are meetings that have not been agreed to. I remember contacting Mark Dreyfus prior to the election, Greg, we'll talk to you, we'll talk about the religious discrimination bill, we'll make sure that Christians are represented. You know what, Neil? Not one word from Mark Dreyfus, not one word. In other words, doors are being shut quite firmly on Christians and Christian organisations, unless of course you are somewhat pro-Labor or pro-Greens or pro-wokeism. So, Neil, quite frankly, Christian organisations do not get the same access as pro-Labor type organisations.
And the organisation that you lead to, Christian Voice Australia, or you're the national spokesperson, you've been, one of the things that you do, because you want to make a difference, a biblical view of the world, you send biblical literature to every member of Parliament. Explain that, how that looks and how that works.
Yeah, just recently, Neil, we sent, through Abraham for Christ, we sent out a copy of Dick Eastman's book, Look What God Is Doing. We sent it to every member of the upper house and every member of the lower house, because it talks about Christian values, it talks about making disciples, and it talks about what it means to be a Christian in a secular world. So that's been sent out to everyone. Neil, praise God, none of them have sent it back to me as yet. So it's there with them sitting either on their desk or hopefully in their library, but not in the garbage can.
And, as all of us will say, obviously, it's all very good to receive a book and go, oh, that's nice, somebody sent us a book, but reading the book, understanding what's in the book might be another challenge. So all of the different ways of contacting and contributing to the political debate are going to be very important over the next month or two ahead before the next federal election. So we'll no doubt be talking again about election and politics and being a Christian and what values. I mean, what even is biblical values? I mean, some of those, we have to sit and just define every now and then. We haven't been able to have time to do that today, but we'll do some more of that as that election gets underway. Greg Bondar, national spokesperson for Christian Voice Australia. He leads also Every Home for Christ in Australia, Every Home for Christ's website, everyhomeforchrist.org.au, and to connect with christianvoiceaustralia.com.au, and that's no doubt where you'll be able to access a copy of this new book that's coming out in just the next little while, this new book, How Should I Vote in 2025? You'll be able to find some details there. Greg Bondar, thanks so much for your update today on 2020.
God bless you, Neil. Thank you.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.